Absolutely not. Now, these types of videos I usually leave for my second channel, since I try and have a level of quality that I maintain for videos on this channel. If you clicked on this and don't know who I am, I've been making Overwatch content for the last half decade, and unlike every other content creator, I'm not changing ground all of a sudden, despite what some of my comments say. You'll likely know that many big Overwatch creators, like Flats, Emong, CarQ, SuperTF, Boga, and GS Raider, who this video is inspired off of, are making the switch over to the newest competitor on the scene, which we'll get to why later. But I want to remain firmly adamant that no, this game is not the Overwatch killer you think it is, and while the game will still very much be active and alive, this honeymoon phase will wear off in 2025. Now, it's pretty clear that Marvel Rivals is trying its best to recreate the glory Overwatch 1 had. It's by no means an Overwatch clone, but it definitely wears its influences on its sleeve. In comparison to Overwatch, the 6v6 is the most obvious part, but the lack of a role queue too, alongside similarities in character design, like how Venom basically functions as Wrecking Ball. To be extra clear, I don't really care about copy-pasting certain features, since I'd be a hypocrite, as the majority of my content ideas are taken from other channels. But I do try and put my own spin on them, whether that be through editing, humor, or storytelling. In other words, I can iterate on a previous product, and that's what Rivals feels like it's doing with Overwatch. There's been some hilarious clips on Twitter, like Iron Man one-shotting the entire enemy team, or Doctor Strange teleporting people off the map,
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. You have to stop it from securing the mission area.
It just never fails. It just never fails. It's so consistently good, bro.
or Jeff the Shark spitting people off the map.
Oh, I'm a 6-man E. Oh my god, 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 oh my Oh my fucking god, I'm actually the best gaming shark, holy shit!
So it's no wonder that almost every Overwatch content creator that actually has influence is flocking to the game. Digzerto tweeted how Overwatch hit its lowest ever player count on Steam since the release of Marvel Rivals, which I do think is a bit disingenuous since the tweet was literally made right before Season 14, but a simple look at Google Trends, and if the projection turns out to be true, Rivals is gonna have a higher peak than Overwatch did back in 2022. Here's the interesting thing though. There are great aspects of Marvel Rivals, like how every character feels that they're OP, which is the fun part of the game. But with that being said, everyone is looking at the game through rose-tinted glasses. We're currently right now in the honeymoon phase of a game's release, and the worst part is that some of us don't even realize it. There's this video that kind of a brat at this dropped, hard glazing Marvel Rivals, and he even says as much at the beginning. But the very insightful thing is that whenever he levies some serious criticism against Marvel Rivals, he quickly brushes it off as a joke, instead of a reality that can actually impact the longevity of the game.
There are classes like tank DPS support, which please, we just need one support on every team, guys. I know it's difficult to understand, but if they're getting health and we're not, we're gonna lose, so please, for the love of God, switch off of Iron Man. You're 0-5, please!
Karq even made a tweet talking about how long term he thinks Marvel Rivals needs some form of role queue, and he made a follow-up video elaborating on it even more. Now, for Overwatch, Goats was probably the final nail in the coffin to actually add role queue, but forget about that comp for a second. People wanted role queue way before the release of Brigitte, because the reality is, playing a competitively minded game where you're forced to play a role that you're not that good at, people didn't really care about that at the release of Overwatch because of how much it was a breath of fresh air. And to be honest, it's almost like history is repeating itself with Marvel Rivals. I find it incredibly ironic that creators are praising the game for how much fun it is while having mechanics that make the game fun for nobody. So here's the 3 main options that Marvel Rivals has, and why all of them are technically good for Overwatch. Firstly, the game will stay open queue. This means that both games, Marvel Rivals and Overwatch, are catering to separate player bases, because one of them, Overwatch, will be more competitively focused, whereas the other game, Marvel Rivals, will focus on a more casual philosophy. The second option is to have a light role queue. KarQ brought this up, but this would essentially be forcing a requirement to have a minimum of 1 support, 1 DPS, and 1 tank. This is still good for Overwatch, because this format is still not as competitively minded, nor is it the same as Overwatch. The last option is to do what Overwatch did, basically have a strict 2-2-2 format. The issue now is that this doesn't really make sense with the balancing philosophy that Marvel Rivals is going for. They're clearly prioritizing fun over strict balance, so restricting the roles that heavily just makes no sense. In other words, why go down that Overwatch path of a strict role queue when Overwatch has, on the whole, done that format decently well, regardless of the grievances you have with 5v5. But this is only me covering the issue of role queue with the game. Linkser, a former Overwatch League pro player, mentioned how the third-person perspective can mislead or be a bit unintuitive to how you aim on Twitter. I'll play his clip here.
Look how far I am aiming. I'm literally aiming like an entire body, and I am perfectly on her. If I'm aiming at the most left side of her, it misses.
Of course, there were some people in his replies trying to dispute this, but he quote tweeted this with yet another example. There's also the optimization issues, which are pretty self-explanatory. Now I need to address why the majority of big Overwatch creators are moving over. But if you've got 2 brain cells, you'll already know the answer.
Money!
The only exception I can think of is GS Raider, who doesn't monetize his videos at all and just makes them for the love of the game. Now before I go into this, I need to be a bit more specific by what I mean by a creator, so let's make a tier list. In S tier, we'll call these guys the millionaires, mostly because they literally are millionaires. This includes people like Flats, J3, Super TF, Emon, etc. To get into S tier, almost all casual and competitive players will know who you are. These guys represent about the top 0.0000001% of the player base, or 1 in 10 million. In A tier, I want to call these guys the mainstream. These are people that make a full-time living off Overwatch, but aren't as big as the S tier creators. These include Spylo, Frogger, Boga, Coach Mills and OC, Neandra, and more. Most casual players should know you, and all competitive players should know you as well. These guys represent about the top 0.0001% of the player base, or 1 in a million. In B tier are the higher middle ground creators. These are people who either make close to full-time, if not at full-time income, but can also be people who are fairly well known. Some good examples would be Commander X, who's in that former category, or GS Raider, who's in that latter category. Demographic gets a bit messy here, but usually some or most casuals will know you, if not some or most competitive players will know you too. They represent about 0.001% of the player base, or about 1 in 100,000. In C tier is lower middle grounds. These are people who make less than those in B tier, typically around a part-time wage, if not slightly more, but if they don't, they're also not as popular as someone like a GS Raider. Personally, I would include myself, Coach Coffee, Rolf, Pixel Rory, as well as Viveros in this tier. Some casuals will know us, and some competitive players will know us too. They represent about 0.01% of the player base, or 1 in 10,000. In D tier, this is what I call the undergrounds. These creators only have a few thousand, if not a few hundred subscribers, so of course they're known by few casuals and or few competitive players. The only person I can think of in this tier is Capitology. They represent between 0.1 and 1% of the player base. That leaves us in F tier, which is basically everyone else. For reference, this was inspired off JReg, who did a pretty similar thing a while ago. So the reason I lay it out like this is because most people that are switching are S and A tier creators. For these guys, it's just a smart business move for them. These creators are so established that in order to build out their brand long term, they can't just be Overwatch creators. They need to be personalities. In other words, people need to watch Super or KarQ or whoever it may be, not because they're associated with Overwatch, but because their personality is really good to watch. In comparison, smaller creators like me don't have that luxury, at least as of yet. I am nowhere near as established as some of these creators that you might watch, which is why I've been so adamant to double down on Overwatch more than ever before. If the big S and A tier creators are moving away from Overwatch, that in theory opens up space in the market for every other creator to keep grinding the game. I can only speak from personal experience, but I've got a bunch more content planned this month, and this very video you're watching was very off the cuff or last minute. Now, how do I leave off this video or answer the title of the video? Well, Marvel Rivals isn't gonna go anywhere anytime soon. However, I don't think it's gonna be a direct competitor to Overwatch unless it goes down a similar path, which would be a dumb idea in my opinion, considering their balancing philosophy. With that being said, if you play Overwatch, you should definitely give Marvel Rivals a try if you haven't already, unless you're in a particular situation like mine, where it does make sense to double down on Overwatch. Anyone telling you that Overwatch is going to be dead is just repeating the same shitty narrative that we've heard a billion different times. I encourage you, look at Google Trends data for literally any big AAA title, including Overwatch. I'm not saying Marvel Rivals is gonna die within 2 months, but I am saying that the hype is gonna die down, just like how it did with the finals, Overwatch 2, or Apex Legends. Not to mention, real ones will remember the dark depths when Overwatch went 2 years without content. If we can survive a situation as bad as that, I'm pretty sure we'll be fine. Anyways, that's it for the video. Do be sure to let me know your thoughts down below.